What's up, guys? KS here. Thanks for joining me today, as always. You guys keep asking for revisits on guns that I still have in the collection. Thank you for that, by the way. Most specifically, you keep asking about the Taurus G2C. So let's dive in and talk about some things I like, some things I don't like, and whether it still runs. Stay tuned. All right, we're going to do a brief walk around the Taurus and talk about some things I like and don't like here in a moment, but a lot of people ask what holster I use for a particular gun, and really with any gun, and that's going to be Harry's holsters here. I've got some information down below, including a code, so if you want to wander over there at your leisure, feel free to do that. It does help the channel, by the way, full disclosure, but again, I run them exclusively and absolutely love them. Now, in terms of the Taurus, it's funny, not many firearms over the last 5 or even 10 years have earned more media coverage, both admiration and ire, than perhaps the Taurus G2C, with the exception of the Sig Sauer P365, and I do have a video comparing the two if you want to wander over there at a later time as well. But the Taurus has both been admired by many fans and also ired or thrown away by many others, and I can totally understand that. Now, the Taurus sits in a budget category, and most people are finding it around the $200 mark or a little bit more, which is pretty exceptional. Now, in terms of size, this is going to be basically a subcompact firearm. Some people toss it in the compact category, not me, and there are a couple of reasons why. First, dimensionally, it's going to be about 21.15 ounces in weight, 6 1/4 inches long, 5 inches tall, and it's got a 3 1/4 inch barrel, so it's a little smaller than something like a Glock 19, which a lot of people consider kind of the pinnacle of compact firearms, but also very much on the small size. This being smaller and only 12 rounds in the magazine, it does come with 2 steel magazines, which is actually pretty cool for a budget firearm. I throw this in the subcompact category, although I admit it is on the bigger side of subcompact. Now, in terms of features, we're going to go pretty quick. It's not a deep dive, but some things I really like and some things I don't like. What I like about this, the grit texture and ergonomics are fantastic. Now, you'll see this grip texture, the grip texture itself is fantastic. It is bitey enough to keep this thing planted. They are front, back, and sides, little bubbles right here, and they really lock you in, and I think they're in the right places for this. You'll notice there are definitely some smooth spots as we move around, especially on the edges. This is great because really, I think firearms rub you the most on the edges, so they left that smooth. I think that's a really good play, but otherwise this texture is fantastic, and I think it looks good too. It's got a little Taurus logo here, so kudos to Taurus for putting it together like this. I think it was a smart design. Now, as we move up, it gets a lot more smooth, and we get into our controls here. This magazine release, I'm not very fond of. I wish it was a little bit bigger. Now, it does have some serrations on it. That's pretty cool. It is not ambidextrous out of the box. I cannot remember for the life of me if you can swap it, so holler down below if you can. But I do wish this was a little bit larger. It definitely works, and man, I'll tell you what, it chucks the magazines out, so that's pretty cool, but a little bigger would be nice. And something I can't stand about the G2C, and that's the same with any polymer firearm that comes with a thumb safety. I am not a fan. I'm not a fan at all. Now, I realize there are a lot of people that this is a requirement for, whether your state requires it or you require it. That's totally cool too. I respect that, but it's just not something that I think you need, and I think it actually gets in the way and could cause problems. But it depends on your shooting style, of course. So that thumb safety, not so much a fan. We do have our slide lock, slide release, not ambi, but it works fine. No complaints about that. But another thing I really like, it actually has a little memory recess on both sides of the forward frame. That's fantastic, and a lot of guns, even at much higher price points, don't have that. Now, I wish it was textured, but the fact is it's there, and it serves as a great memory point for your thumb, or at least I use it that way. I like that quite a bit. Now, it does have an accessory rail. I haven't really taken advantage of that very much. I do know that the Olight Mini Valkyrie 2, or whatever it's called, the PL Mini 2, that does fit. It's the adjustable one. So if you're curious about that. And then the takedown, I don't do it in these types of videos, a revisit, but it's extremely easy. It's pretty similar to a Glock. Go back to the original video to check that disassembly out. But otherwise, that's the layout of the frame. I like most of it. The magazine release could be a little bit bigger, and the thumb safety can just go out the window. That is not a thing for me. But then as we move up on the slide, I have noticed that the slide is starting to show some wear, and I have carried this gun. By the way, this is not rust on the barrel. It's actually a little bit of grease, in case you're curious. If for whatever reason this barrel likes to gather grease, I'm not sure where it stores it in the slide, but it is definitely not rust. I've been keeping a very close eye, and I would have no problem telling you if this thing was rusting, but it is not. But again, the slide finish is definitely starting to show some wear. I've carried this maybe about 3 dozen times or so, so admittedly not very often, but even still, it's showing wear pretty quickly. I kind of expected that. I mean, it's got some definite wear marks and scratches, that sort of thing. And I haven't been throwing this around necessarily, but just kind of average use, and perhaps not taking as much care as I would like a CZTSO or something like that. So definitely wear, but it's got a matte finish. I do like that. Now the serrations on the back, I don't think are necessarily that deep. I mean, they're deep enough if you have dry hands, but if you've got really oily hands or something, it could potentially be problematic. Some people have complained about that. I haven't actually found that to be the case yet, but I would like these to be a little deeper. And you do have some cuts up here on the slide if you want to do press checks. I do not take advantage of that, but some people have said they really like that feature. So that is pretty cool. Now, one thing I did not care for at all on this was the front sight situation. And you'll see that this is going to be kind of a red-orange. That's fingernail polish. I did that myself. It's my first time with fingernail polish. It's really true. And it worked quite well. It certainly improved because the original white dot that was in the polymer sight, it's polymer, not a fan of that either. It was extremely dim. It was very difficult to pick up, and the shooting sequences that I'm showing throughout this video, that was with the original sight. I didn't care for it. Probably would have cleaned up the shooting a little bit, although you guys know me, I'm not the best shooter out there, but still maybe a little bit. And then the rear sight, very interesting. Now it is polymer again, so if you're going to be knocking this thing up against a table or something, there's a chance it could break. But it is adjustable. It's fully adjustable for windage and elevation. That is something you just do not see, especially at this price point, this size of gun, a lot of polymer guns in general. So the fact that it's got some adjustability for your shooting style is actually pretty darn cool. And then we do have a loaded chamber indicator. Again, not a fan of that. However, it does not impede the sight lineup. So it's fine that it's there. It doesn't really bother me. And it's tactile if you want to know you've got a round in there. That's perfectly fine. But otherwise, that is about the layout. Now to give you an idea of the barrel, it is definitely showing some wear. I expected that again on this, but it is still holding up just fine without too much of an issue. So there's your layout of the Taurus. We're going to be talking about the shooting experience here in just a moment. All right, as we get into talking about the shooting, I do want to talk a little bit about this trigger because it is an unusual trigger, and just to remind us a little bit about it because I both like and dislike this trigger. Now it is polymer and it does have a safety lever in the middle. And when we start moving this thing back, you'll notice that the take-up on this is tremendously long. In fact, usually when I pick this up, if I haven't been shooting it for a month or two, whatever it is, and I start to try and fire it, I think, oh man, I've got a dead trigger or it's broken or something, and that is not the case. In fact, you just need to pull through and you get to your wall, and there's your break. And it's not crisp. I mean, it's a little bit spongy. However, it's about a little under 4.5 pounds. That is pretty remarkable for this. And then the reset on it is actually really good. That is a short reset. It's not uber short by any stretch. I'm not trying to kid any of us, but that is pretty darn short. Now we're going to do this a couple more times. So we've got our take up, very clean. There, it's just dead air there. And then we get to our wall. Long trigger, it really is. However, still not bad. And then our reset and a follow-up shot. So trigger overall, again, longer than I would want it to be, but still not a bad trigger, especially at this price point. Now, I am not going to reset the gun. I did not rack the slide like I often do. You'll notice that I let that trigger go. You might have heard a couple clicks, and we'll do this a few times. It's a very interesting feature for the Taurus G2C. You'll notice I can actually make that trigger go again. It turns into a double action trigger, and actually not a very heavy double action trigger. This has double strike capability. That is a very interesting feature. There are your clicks. Very, very interesting feature for this. I can't think of another polymer firearm just off the top of my head that does something like this. So that is pretty cool. We'd have to get into the double action, single action realm for that. So I think that's a very interesting feature. I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about using that very much or anything, but the fact is it's there, and that is pretty darn cool. Now, in terms of shooting, I passed a milestone just a little while ago. I've got about 1,050 rounds, I believe, through this. It might be a little bit more, but I think that's right. And I'll tell you what, guys. for Taurus, for having a reputation of not being as reliable as some other brands out there, and as much trouble as a lot of people have given this firearm, I will tell you, at 1,000 rounds, 100% flawless. Now I realize 1,000 rounds is not a lot, and I think 2 or 5,000 or even 10,000 rounds is really where stories start to be told about this. Hopefully good, but the fact is, 1,000 rounds is pretty darn good through a firearm, and a lot of people don't put that many rounds through a firearm ever. So I've been very proud that this thing has held up very well. It's not at a single failure at all, and even trying to induce, I've tried some weak-handed shooting, and it still has performed well. So kudos to Taurus for that. So guys, be sure to leave a comment down below. Let me know your experience with the Taurus G2C. My experience so far has actually been glowing, and I've been very impressed with this thing. So I want you to holler down below, tell me your experience, and whether you agree or are interested in this or not. Perhaps you're not, and I totally get that as well. There are a lot of great options out there for sure. So guys, holler down below. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.